You didn't expect a sequel to my top 5 worst FNaF fan games, didn't ya? Well, let's just say that I'm here to tackle some more bad FNaF fan games because, oh boy, there's still a decent amount, especially some from this current year of 2022. Also because, well, people like these videos for some reason, I think. In all seriousness though, here are the usual rules. Number 1, the fan game must have a decent following as to avoid criticizing fan games clearly made by children or beginners. It just wouldn't be fair. 2, please do not harass any of the developers, dev team members, or fans of the respective games. That's not cool. That's not what we do around here. And 3, please keep in mind that these are all my personal opinions and it's okay to disagree. And here's a 4th rule I'm adding on. No games or any game in the series on the remake list do not count. I want to explore different shit, not the same shit. Without further ado, let's do this again. I really do like the Five Nights with Mac Tonight series. It's a series that I used to follow a lot back in the day, and is one of the few FNaF fan game series where it's actually ended. However, I'm not going to be the type that is going to say every game in the series is good. Case in point, the original version of the second game, Five Nights with Mac Tonight 2. This game has you playing as Chris, the main antagonist of the series, and you're in a warehouse where you're meant to keep watch of the animatronics in the facility. However, they're being tampered with each night, and plot twist, it's you tampering with them. Now, by far, the main issue with this game is that its gameplay is clunky. The gameplay is a bit of a mess. First off, there is this bug in later nights that is yet to be patched to this day, which is of the vent not working against a Hamburglar like it's supposed to. And secondly, and most importantly, the mechanics just don't form together that well. The rhythm you're supposed to get into when playing as time goes on is just weird. And third of all, say it with me, it is boring. Also, the visuals are kind of dull and bland. The color palette mostly consists of shades of gray and black, and it doesn't stand out in a unique way. There is a remastered version of this game, and it is superior by far, both in terms of the gameplay and visuals. The gameplay was handled better due to the substance of the mechanics being better and forming a better gameplay pattern, and the visuals amp up by adding shades of blue in places, and it just generally looks better. This game isn't terrible, but it's not that great either. Now, Post Shift 2 was bad in a very interesting way. Going into this game, I thought it was going to be straight up broken, but no, this game has a different problem. Its difficulty is just honestly too overbearing. Part A quite simply has too much. The explanations of the mechanics to start off are a complete word salad and makes you forget what you said just 2/3 of the time. Am I playing a game or am I reading a damn essay? And since you forget the shit 2/3 of the time, you're prone to making more mistakes, especially since characters like Minute or Baby are explained earlier than the night they're supposed to appear. She's explained in night 1, even though the only characters that come out on night 1 are Revenant Freddy, Minute Freddy, and Minute Foxy, and then you start to understand the gameplay mechanics for each character, and then it just becomes stupid from a game design perspective. It shouldn't take me 4 to 5 clicks to get away from Minute or Freddy when he's in the construction area. I will admit that the sound cues are distinct enough to understand which sound cue belongs to who, but still, the game can be unnecessarily luck-based too. And with Part B, oh boy, it is all unbalanced, RNG-infested bullshit. All 3 nights in this part, 4, 5, and 6. Like, dude, what the hell is this shit? Post Shift 2 is just a trash fire. Post Shift 1 was honestly a pretty solid experience, but its sequel, man, holy fuck. I'm glad the developer is improving and learning from this experience because that is honestly still commendable. Now, I'm not the only one who doesn't care for this game. This game has been endlessly criticized over the years since its 2016 release for fair reason in my eyes. This game is often seen as the weakest in the Five Nights at Candy series, and I can't help but agree. First of all, the environments are some of the most bland and unimaginative visuals to ever come out of a FNaF fan game. The lack of detail too, I get it's a warehouse setting, but this sorta has a similar issue I had with Five Nights with Mac Tonight 2, where the visuals were dull. You do what the remastered version of said game did and add some blue shading or at least some other color that isn't most of the animatronics appearances throughout the game or the sodas or candy plushie or whatever the fuck you have in the office. I feel like it would give this game much more of an identity if that makes sense. And my other problem with this game is without a doubt the gameplay being a hot mess. Fellow fanverse developer and YouTube streamer Fisnum has literally proved that it is possible to get through the game by cheesing it, glitching it, all the above. That alone just instantly kills any tension building up inside you when playing the game. And without the glitching, the gameplay just has the similar effect the graphics do. It's just bland. This game is bland. It's boring. The only true positives I have with this game are the music, whether made by a hired composer of a mill or taken from the internet, and the minigames. They offer some pretty good lore in the Five Nights at Candy series, and I'll always love how cold and somewhat hard-hitting the secret ending minigame that teases Candies 3 is. Pure bliss. Otherwise, unless you're playing for the lore, hence the minigames, I recommend skipping out on this game. Just stick with the third game and the remastered version of the first game. This game is just nothing. This is going to be the game that people will assassinate me for being on this list, but what do I have to say about that? I don't care. Juniors is overrated as fuck. What I love about this game is its gameplay and story. To get out of the way, the visuals in this game are purely fantastic. I also really love the character designs. Most of them are genuinely terrifying and give me the good old FNaF 1 vibes. Also, the soundtrack for this game is extremely good. But that's it. The gameplay sucks because, first of all, explanations for shit are vague as hell to understand. To be fair, this problem got better with later patches, but still. And once you do understand the gameplay and you're actually playing it, the game ranges from too easy to frustrating to fucking annoying to even boring. This game can be a snore fest at times, and this game can be bullshit and unfair at other times. Part of me genuinely feels like no care or barely any effort was put into the game's gameplay and mechanics at all, and a lot of the shit just feels underdeveloped in a few areas. And oh boy, besides the London Bridge music track, which is one of my favorite music tracks from any FNaF related media ever, Night 6 fucking sucks. I'm sorry. Just like the rest of the game, it feels extremely disjointed. The night is in two halves. The first half is just a shittier and lazier copy of FNaF 2, and the second half is a boss fight with this game's version of Mangle, which is by far one of the worst boss fights in a FNaF related game I've ever fucking played. It's not as bad as Burntrap's boss fight in Security Breach, but this boss fight is still dog. Again, with the vague directions and the Ghost Girls mechanic being annoying as sin, barely gives you any time to do what you need to do. It's just a mess. Also, the jump scares in this game are dog shit. They're not terrifying, they're not even cool, the jump scare sound effect used is just bland. And now, this game's story. It is even worse than the gameplay. It's trash. Firstly, the ending is so abrupt and it literally teases a sequel that is confirmed not to even be happening anymore, and it was like that before the game's first release. Secondly, there's more questions than answers by the end. Why does the girl go after Paul Bear? Who's the identity of this ghost? How did she die? Why are they haunting the pizzeria in the first place? What is Paul Bear's relation to Juniors? How can a ghost girl, a literal ghost girl, be stabbed by a knife by a real human being and be physically affected and hurt by it? And don't pull that remnant bullshit on me. Nah. And also don't pull the it's meant to be ambiguous card, because there's nothing in this game that tries to imply any of that tone. There is no interpretation to be made. It's not ambiguity, it's plot holes. The thing that happens when your story is poorly written. As well, speaking of poorly written, I just don't buy the scene before Night 4 with Paul Bear and the protagonist. It attempts to bring heart and emotion and feeling into this game's story, but in the end, it's all forced because we don't know anything meaningful about the protagonist. All we know is he's an investigator and that he's got issues of his own. We know nothing else from a personality point of view. We literally know more about Paul Bear than the protagonist. Therefore, this dynamic they're trying to set up is just unbelievable and not in a good way. Bottom line, I really don't like Juniors at all, even post-patch. All from a gameplay and lore perspective. And it's not like I'm hating on this game because the lead developer, Raymond, was one of the main three behind the Pear scandal back in 2022 in the FNaF community, which I and others have gone to detail about before. I'm hating on this game because it's genuinely a bad game in my opinion. I just want to say though, when I'm bitching about this game, remember, my problems come from the gameplay and story, which all of that, or at least almost all of it, was put together by Raymond, the lead developer. He's the one that I blame for this game turning out the way it did. The other members of the development team are comprised of coders, people who worked on the visuals and soundtrack. I commend their efforts, and like I said earlier, the visuals and soundtrack are the good things about this game, so please don't assume I'm shitting on a group of people's work. I'm really just shitting on one person. The one person in particular honestly deserved it for what he did anyway. It only gets worse from here though, because we carry on to number 1. Where do I start? No, seriously, where do I start? Dormant Abyss is a fucking awful FNaF fangame. It sucks in almost every way, from the visuals and models to the gameplay to especially the lore and world building. Starting off with the visuals, everything is ugly, and not in a good horror way. Oh no. The environments, the animatronic models, and other visuals and designs all look like they were mixed together in a hot oven, and then placed into a grinder, and then proceed to get stabbed by a sharp object multiple times. They look that bad. I will admit that there are some unique concepts for character designs, but the execution of all of them just each form an individual glop. The textures are just hideous, some of the shapes are just weird, it's just bleh. Then there's the gameplay, which is all a hot mess. Yes, there is a rhythm in place, but it is damn messy. Also, may I mention that this tutorial is so damn wordy and it makes me feel an aneurysm inside of me. Walls of text as tutorials is just something else, I tell ya. The game in general just makes me feel angry, and I've yet to get to the worst aspect of this game. The aspect of the game that almost everyone to my knowledge is in full agreement towards despising, and that's the lore. So if you've been living under a rock in the FNaF community for quite a while, basically the developer of this game, Nichi, is a pedophile as well as many other things. I've gone into detail with this man in my Fangame Iceberg video, so if you want to hear more about Nichi specifically, you can just go there. But his crimes are being brought up here because Dormitibus is by far the biggest example of an awful creator's wrongdoings being completely reflected in their creation, and is usually the counterpoint to the separate creator and creation rule. So, the main antagonist of Dormitibus is this game's version of Afton, Garvey, and one of the bad crimes Garvey commits is child rape against the girl who becomes Chica. I'm not joking. I'm not making theories or assumptions or exaggerations. No, nuh-uh. This is an actual plot point in the game's story. It is said in newspapers, it is described in tapes, and it's almost shown in the cardboard theater minigame. Garvey is what I like to call a mouthpiece. He is a self-insert of Nichi. Garvey and Nichi are the same. They both love children in a sexual way, and are both very fucked individuals. People loved Dormitibus when it first came out, even with the child rape aspect of the story. They still thought the game was good from a gameplay and visuals perspective. But you really just can't now, especially with the context of what the developer did. And this is one of those rare cases in the FNaF community where I can't separate creator and creation. I'll gladly do it with one-handed flumpties, but for this game, I just can't. Garvey Wright is a representation of its developer. Dormitibus isn't a FNaF fangame about a man surviving against Havoc animatronics in a post-death purgatory because of them wanting his ectoplasm and Garvey shows up. No. Dormitibus is about a real man trying to reveal and come out about his horrible actions in a way that people wouldn't expect and continue to still support him. A FNaF fangame, a genre of games that are played by people to have fun, to get scared, and admire the passion of the developer or the developers that make them. When you play a FNaF fangame, you usually never have to think about the developer's personal life when playing the game itself. That's why what Nichi did was clever in his opinion. FNaF fangames are not always safe when it comes to horrible people, and Dormitibus is a clear example why.